we're going to put you in the hot seat and open up the phones.
That's okay. I always love the listeners. I'm happy to take their calls.
And if you want to talk with Summer Reese, Executive Director of Pacifica, she's at 818-985-5735, 818-985 KPFK. I don't have a phone producer, so you will ring, and then at one point or other, you will be clicked and you'll be on the air, and it'll be a surprise. And
so play nicely, please.
Yeah, I might be able to answer a phone or two in advance, but I'm not sure. I was tickled by the way Richard Perotsky at the one staff meeting that I went to, that the first one.
Yes.
And he introduced himself to us, and he said that at KPFK they don't look at audience. They dispensed with audience figures because they knew that everybody loved their programs, and they don't care when programs are on, or they didn't care what time programs were on, because everybody knew that whatever time these marvelous programs are on, the audience tunes into that time and loves to listen then. And so they just dispensed with any kind of study of audience figures, which are...
Well, like other matters of the truth, if the data doesn't agree with you, perhaps you want to dispense with it so you can continue with whatever you'd like to believe, despite the facts.
That's it. That's the principle, yes.
Yes, I'm afraid, with our audience data, despite whatever concerns one might have with data gathering, some of it is right there, with the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. The reason we're losing our CSG grant is they have a listening index goal of 13. This is a scale for Los Angeles. Our actual listening index, 1. They have a listener community financial support index goal of 50. Our actual community financial support index, 16. So it's, and this is what, well, we do still get Arbitrons, or now Nielsen audio ratings for Los Angeles, but we rate below a station in Palmdale. So, and we have the most powerful signal west of the Mississippi virtually. So it's, when you look at like what our capacity is, what our potential is, the ability that we have to reach the public, and the percentage of the public that we're actually reaching, if we truly believe in the mission statement, like for everyone that's involved with the organization because they think social justice is important, because they think being engaged in the dialogue of what goes on in the country is important, never mind art, culture, music, and everything that you cannot get on mainstream homogenized corporate media, all of that, we should all be wanting to increase our listenership, not just because we want to pay the light bill, but because we think what we're doing is important enough to reach more people. And when people hear us, so many people respond so positively when they go, wow, yeah, I heard that station. That was really something. I've never heard stuff like that before. But you got to get those new ears on the radio. And when they go there, yeah, it has to sound pretty decent. It has to be okay. It can be esoteric. It can be totally something you've never encountered before, but it should be well presented. It should be well produced. It should be factual. It should be researched. It should have the work put into it, that something that shows that you care has put into it, and many of our programs have that, and the ones that don't need to, have that production support and training and dialogue and planning, that again, because it shows, when you put effort into putting a program together, you can hear it on the air versus when you just sort of wing it on the fly and hope it sounds okay, and the quality of our broadcast signals is so high that it's, it's almost criminal not to utilize them in the absolute, broadest fashion that you can, to not make the most of them. And that's what I want to see us do. We have these tools at our disposal. We're in a world in distress where the global economy is still collapsing, despite whatever they say. It's still in free fall, okay? And at any moment, it may hit the United States in an ever greater fashion. And people are nervous about that. And of course, that's affecting listener support. So get more listeners. Don't hit the same people up for more money. Get more people. It's a no-brainer. If nobody has enough money, get more people contributing a little bit all the time because they think it's important. Because what we have to say is important. It is important to break down what's going on economically and politically. We are living pardon me, in a burgeoning fascist state. They're tracking our every move. And we're all like so used to it. I mean, I joke like, the smartphones, in the 60s and 70s, people are fighting COINTELPRO and fighting surveillance and don't track me and don't tag me. Oh, but now it's convenient. Hold on. You can have a little device that'll tell you who I'm calling, when I'm calling them, where I've been, track me with GPS, read my email, NSA, hello. And every activist has one. What kind of world is that? So obviously this stuff is important. Who's going to talk about the Edward Snowdens if we don't? It's like we're one of the only places you hear this stuff. And that's not like, it's not a pitch line. It's not a joke. And for all those 170 community radio stations, we're talking about college stations, Native American stations, low-power FM stations, internet stations that have no budgets to acquire programming whatsoever, no budgets frequently to produce programming whatsoever. And if we didn't exist, all they would have access to is, NPR that they can't even afford. So, we're it for so many places in terms of having a pool of resources from which to draw programmatic content to fill out whatever they're doing locally. So I think it's important on a large societal level. That's what got me involved with the station to begin with, was literally speaking at the FCC hearings against media consolidation because I was horrified at the loss of. We used to have even more commercial outlets, and at least sometimes, two newspapers would express a different opinion. What two newspapers? They're gone,
Local coverage.
Local coverage. Oh, my God, what's that, So I think that it's so far beyond just sort of like our basic survival of, like the equivalent of how do I pay the rent? No, it's like, do you think this is actually worth preserving? Do you want to see this place, and it's you have to sometimes let go of the baby to let it survive. On some levels, people have to be willing to let go of their individual attachment to a specific outcome to say the overall holistic, the whole, is much more important, than one individual piece of it.
Okay. KPFK Los Angeles, you're on the air with Summer Reese.
Hello, thank you for doing this program tonight, Summer and Roy.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I was at the last LSD meeting, and Fred Blair, the audit committee chairman, mentioned out loud that Pacifica is $6 million in debt. And I wonder if you could clarify these kind of figures.
Well, I'd say that's a little bit higher than where we're at, but our largest creditor is Democracy Now!, and we're a couple of $1 million in debt there. And although I have managed to contain legal costs and see to it that no employment litigation has been filed since I've taken over this position, there are still significant legal settlements from cases that originated prior to my tenure. And so we have hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal bills across the network that still have to be paid. Part of the problem there is, for instance, our East Coast stations, again, being quite troubled financially. We're one network, and despite what people think about, local versus national, when debts come calling, if a local station doesn't have it, the debt belongs to the entire corporation. We're one corporation. Each radio station is owned by the Pacifica Foundation. And it's great when everybody's like, this is all local, except the debts aren't all local. They belong to all of us. And so we have, $260,000 in severance that has to be paid in New York City. And, people are horrified about that, except if you can't make your payroll legally, you cannot continue to employ people. And that was the situation in New York. We have, lawsuit there that has over $100,000 owing on one lawsuit. It's literally lawsuits and Democracy Now! That's the debt situation overall throughout the network. And then on the East Coast, we have infrastructure issues. If you want to get into sort of like the long-standing survival of the network, we have old transmitters in 3 out of our 5 stations. Los Angeles and Berkeley have solid-state transmitters, but New York, Washington, D.C., and Houston are running on tubes. And this is very old equipment. And without things like a capital campaign and a plan for infrastructure replacement, the potential for catastrophic failure is huge. We've been running at 10% power in Washington, D.C. for months. We're on multiple extensions with FCC for low power at this point. We're running on low power in Houston, Texas. So I would say that we are nowhere near $6 million in debt, unless he is, I would have to talk with Fred as to how he's coming with those figures, but that's not like actual debt, okay? The actual debt is significantly less than that, but it's a couple million to Democracy Now! By now, and the rest is mostly legal.
I know, but thank you.
Sure, thank you.
You're on the air with Summer Reese.
Yes, I want to be sure that Summer Reese knows that the reason that I'm calling is because I love Roy. That's the only... Most of the time I listen is during the night, and I would like to become a sustaining member if you can take my information.
Well, thank you. God bless you. That's awesome.
We don't have any free hands.
Oh, boy, we don't. And, well, if you could take her off the air, could someone take her phone number? Yes, we're going to take you off air so you don't have to give your information, and then someone's going to pick up the line and take your information. Okay, ma'am? Thank you so much.
And, well, wait, I want to tell you how wonderful I think you are.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I seldom hear a woman who can speak on and say so much and use such marvelous English. I love you.
Thank you. I must credit my mother, Geneva, for her fine home education as a child.
Okay.
Thank you. I love you, too. And thank you for supporting Roy's show and the station. We really, really appreciate it.
Okay, I'm hanging on.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Can you pick up that line? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And we have open lines if you want to call in. We're at 818-985-5735, 818-985-KPFK. Your call can be next. And if you want to talk to Executive Director, face-to-face, Summer Reese of Pacifica.
Or at least voice-to-voice.
Voice-to-voice. 818-985-KPFK as the phone number that you know so well and know and love so well. One of the big changes that nobody talks about because nobody's been here long enough. Well, here we go. Hello, you're on the air with Summer Reese.
Hi, Roy. Hi, Summer. I've been listening to Pacifica since BAI in the mid-'60s when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah.
And I just want to congratulate you both. I think what I'm hearing is really exciting because I sometimes get the feeling, I mean, I've been a member many times and look forward to renewing next week. I sometimes get the feeling that it's a kind of a top-down, old-school mentality. I'll give you one example. People might not agree, but for example, the Spanish programming, I know loads of Latino and Latina people. I never hear them talking about it. I get the feeling they don't know about it. And I get the feeling it's too much at once, like as if there should be some kind of English-Spanish transition over time. But you're talking specifically about sort of, you know, the iPhone model of radio, which, as we all know in media and entertainment, is going to be the model.
Yeah.
So I think it's very exciting to hear that happening to Pacifica because, I mean, I've been listening since, you know, Josephson and, you know, Kunstler and all that, and Roy and Alan Watts. And it would be a shame to not have it anymore. So good luck and congratulations.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that feedback. And yes, I see that we're a technology-driven business, and in order to continue operating, one has to adjust with that technology and to what consumer demands are because the listeners dictate what we do. They really do. And what people want, how they want to receive the information is as important as the information they're receiving. And
I'm a 45, 50-year movie person, and I can tell you that it's possible to retain the artistry in the face of changing technology.
Yes.
So I think you can do it.
Great. Thank you so much for calling.
Thanks, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
KPFK Los Angeles, you're on the air with Summer Reese.
Yes, thank you, Summer Reese. I really enjoy your refreshing comments.
Thank you.
And you are very articulate.
Thank you.
And I have two problems with the station. I'm ready to come down and help the station. I live in Lancaster.
Ah, okay.
We cannot get this signal out here in Lancaster.
It hasn't gotten any better since we replaced the other half of the transmitter?
No.
Oh, well, see, we need a repeater up there. You know, I've got a house up in the desert, too. Yeah.
Every day I tell 10 people about KPFK. I'm over at the senior center every day telling people about KPFK.
Well, I'm hopeful that as we continue to address our financial needs and to improve things, we've done some really good work at putting repeaters in different parts of Southern California to get the signal out to a wider area. But I know that the high desert is a neglected area and that we should, you know, it's a financial issue as much as anything. But it would be good to get a repeater out there to help bring the signal up over the mountains there.
That would be great. All we have are church stations and Mexican stations.
Well,
is there a way to limit Mexican language on this station?
Well, there are many ways to address the multilingual issue. It is somewhat difficult to switch back and forth between languages for both languages, because you don't have an opportunity to build your Spanish language audience and you lose your English language audience, and it is a challenge, and there have been many suggestions as to how to address that. One of the things, going back to what I was saying before in terms of launching internet radio stations, because this is truly where so much of the audience is going, is I would like to see us, in addition to launching an English language internet radio station this year, to launch what I call Pacifica en Español, where we could have 24 hours a day in Spanish programming and be able to source from around the world in terms of what's going on in Venezuela and Argentina and Spain, and actually put that onto a dedicated, progressive, mission-centric channel. But
is there a way to have English translation at the same time? Can't we understand what Mexican is?
Well, when people are able to do like a bilingual program, if they're able to do it effectively, it can work very well. I've heard some bilingual programs where and one has to be quite skilled to switch back and forth between the two languages so that you don't lose either audience. But it can definitely be done. And in terms of improving our programming blocks, that's something we're going to be addressing as well, and I hope that we'll see some improvements in the next year on for both audiences, for both our Spanish language and our English language audience.
It's 4 hours every night. It's 4 hours every night I lose. I turn it off. I'm getting Pasadena.
Well, we hope that you'll listen during the other hours, and I hope we can address the issues of getting the broadcast signal further out into the desert, because I know it's desperately needed up there. If there was any place we need KPFK, it is definitely the Inland Empire and the high desert.
I've tried to have a branch out here where we had meetings of KPFK listeners. I put an ad in the paper.
Wow, that's nice. That's excellent.
So I'd like that. Now I'm realizing with the withdrawals out of your checking account, you do not stop the withdrawals out of my checking account. Every year I have to close my account so you stop taking my money out of the bank.
Well, all you need to do, ma'am, is call Monday through Friday during business hours.
I did.
And
3 times
did you
called.
Okay,
I've written letters.
why don't we take you offline? Let me get someone to get your phone number, okay? And I'll give it to subscriptions myself tomorrow, okay? All right,
okay,
ma'am.
I'm ready to come down. I'm ready to come down.
Thank you.
I will volunteer once a week.
We'd love to have you come down and help us. We're going to take you off the air so that Mansour can get your information, and then I'll take that over to subscriptions for you. Okay?
KPFK Los Angeles. You're on the air with Summer Reese.
Hello, how you doing?
Hi.
My name's Fernando from Aztec Revolution, and it makes me feel so good to know that KPFK is out there for the community, and to have a program such as Break Beats and Rhymes with Rebels to the Grain is absolutely outstanding. Their community involvement, and they're out there 110%. They give it their all every week, and I just really admire the fact that there's a station out there that supports the cultural music of hip hop.
Thank you. I'm glad you appreciate that show.
And one thing is that we need more stations out there with that community involvement. And KPFK, they do it. You guys are awesome, and I give you mad props and respect. Keep doing what you do, and just want to say one love, respect. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for calling in and letting us know which programs you like.
KPFK Los Angeles, you're on the air with Summer Reese.
Hi, good evening, Roy. Good evening, Summer.
Good evening.
By the way, the lady who was expressing your articulation and your mannerisms, it's fantastic, and you plus also have a beautiful voice, by the way, if I may add. But
Thank you.
I'm in Lake Elsinore in a little tiny cove where nothing can pass, no signals, but you come in, the station comes in booming.
Excellent. That would be the fantastic new transmitter.
Y'all, it's bodacious.
It is.
Okay. If you were spewing vitriol, hate speech, and lies, they'd be lined up.
Yeah.
So few I found in this entertainment culture, they could care less about any fact, evidence, truth. It's just the job's it seems insurmountable to me. Good luck, and this may be just a rumor, but patch things up with Gary Null.
Well, I try to stay on decent working relationship with everyone that's involved with our network. I think Gary's as fine.
Great.
And thank you. And, on what you were saying in terms of the entertainment-driven culture, it takes some effort to think about what's going on in the world around you, and it takes thinking people. But I believe people respond well to real information and the truth, And anyway, thank you for listening. We appreciate it.
Let's hope so. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. KPFK, you're on the air with Summer Reese.
Yes, hi. Thank you very much for the comments that you made about helping the station to grow and expand beyond just the model that has been used over the past years. I've been a long-time listener, but I just have to confess to two things that I've been really, really disappointed and frustrated with.
Sure.
One is the way, and I'm sure you've heard this from other people, the way that the fund drives are handled.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with you that, again, there are too many premiums, and the whole thing about delivery and all of that, something needs to happen there.
Yes.
I get very frustrated when I tune in, let's say, to Democracy Now!, and Amy Goodman does about 15 minutes, and then she has to spend the rest of the hour on pitching, which I think is important, but something needs to happen there, because I get invested in a show, and then all of a sudden I'm confronted with, okay, premiums and this and this. I think if you spend less time on that, it might help your listenership. That's one area that sorely needs to be addressed, as you pointed out in your comments. And the whole idea of, fundraising, but doing it in a different way, having a fundraising committee, again.
Yes.
And then the second thing is that I don't think you need a local, station board or advisory board. All this micromanaging has also caused, I think, among many listeners, a lot of confusion, when they have to vote on various people who are addressing positions and all of that. You don't need it. NPR does not do that. I'm not saying that KPFK has to imitate everything that NPR does, but maybe subscriptions and doing a little bit less of that, and not having a local station board would really, really help. I do agree that internet radio is a good way to go. Got to expand. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much for calling in. Yes, on the fund drive issues, planning, co-pitching, things that make it more effective, keeping regular programming on, but putting someone in to pitch with the regular person to help them do it more effectively. Doing it in small bites, not big, long segments, asking people to really support the programming, not getting them on, oh, do I get one more goodie if I send a little more money? But no, hey, was this a good show? Did I really like it? I want to keep this on the air. Some of these issues we're addressing, again, by changing structural issues, at the national level, instituting essentially internal auditing to see to it that, in fact, premiums have been ordered in a reasonable length of time after the close of a fund drive so that they can be fulfilled and sent to the listeners within the 6 to 8 weeks that we've told them they will receive a premium. And then, yes, addressing not having so many of them that we turn into a mail order house rather than a radio station. One wants to stay focused on the mission, which is producing quality programmatic content for the public. Now, when you get to the board issue, we all know this is a hot topic, but I've talked about it in the New York Times, so I can talk about it right here on Roy's show. Having served as the chair of the national board for 3 years and served on the local board for 6, I do feel that I'm fairly experienced in how well we function or do not function. Structurally, the current setup under the bylaws require us to hold elections 2 out of every 3 years. On average, these election cycles cost us approximately $250,000 each election for the network as a whole, all 5 radio stations. So divide that up amongst the 5 stations, you're talking about $50,000 per station approximately to elect a local board that frequently the listeners have no idea who any of the people are, don't know how to select who should be on the board, and for which there is such low voter turnout that we have trouble achieving the 10% quorum. I think there are many ways to address that. I've advocated for smaller board size, and that comes, frankly, from the dint of, college course on group dynamics and the fact that smaller groups are more functional. So it's nothing nefarious or reducing representation, but rather just that you can more effectively get more work done if you have a slightly smaller working group, because our boards are currently 24 members and an ideal working group is about 12 members. So taking those positive changes so that you still have boards, because people desire to serve their stations and they do represent different communities, but you want to learn how to create a dynamic so that everyone who comes to the board is able to be effective and feels part of a community where their work is valued and important and where they're able to plug in and do something effectively. And, last year we weren't able to hold an election because we simply didn't have the money to hold elections. This year we have to hold an election, and I'm probably moving us towards virtually all electronic voting with an opt-in system if you want to be mailed something, because that will reduce our costs significantly. We haven't yet changed the bylaws in terms of how frequent our election cycles are or how large our boards are, but we can start addressing perhaps how high the costs are of conducting these elections. And I believe there's a growing dialogue in Pacifica amongst people of different viewpoints on what would be a better board structure, what would be more effective bylaws, because a board, the organization shouldn't serve the board. The board has to serve the organization. And what is the organization's function? Again, we are a media outlet. Our function is to be a venue, an avenue for people's voices so that people can produce things that they think are important and actually be able to get them out to the listening public. And the board's function should be to see to it that the organization survives and thrives and does well and has sufficient funding to be able to continue its operation. So I think at least there's a healthy dialogue going on this year as to what a re-envisioned board structure might look like that would protect the assets of the organization, allow community involvement, serve the different constituencies that make up our listening community, and also really serve the long-term survival of the organization and its positive growth.